They tried to stop me, they tried to drop me. They put 8 million pixels on a screen to co-opt me, and yet they still can't stop me. You see, I freed myself so I can be myself, because being someone else is bad for my health.
Yo, good afternoon everybody, how you doing? I am your coach, Uncle Renz, and today we are going to be answering a question that was sent in to me by one of my YouTube subscribers, Just a Simple Life, I'm Good. That's his code name on, handle name on YouTube. So I appreciate the questions. You know, guys, keep on, sending me your questions, and who knows what question is going to cause me to go into this like rampant state of study, and then of course we'll get back and we'll come out and I'll answer the question and then give you even more, probably more detail than you asked for, because I believe in over delivering. In everything that I do, I believe that you should over deliver. So I'm about to seriously over deliver on the question that I was asked. And here's the thing about it. He asked one question, but within the elements of the question, within the elements of the answer, I should say, there is a ton load of additional answers that I'm going to give to you guys based on this. So, I mean, sit back, buckle your seats, get your mind right, because we finna take a ride into the past, the present, the history, the mindset, the understanding of a lot of things that you may have been missing. We're gonna answer some other questions that, could be a whole video by itself, could be a whole talk by itself. So let's get right into it. What was the question that was asked? The question that he asked was, does it bother anybody else, or is it just him, or is there a misunderstanding possibly as to the fact that Moses' mother is also his aunt? Now the quick and easy answer to this would be yes, it's his great aunt. That's the quick and easy answer. And then of course the easy excuse that most people of the Abrahamic religions will give is that's just what they did back then. But it was outlawed soon after. Like, it was outlawed, in the Mosaic law not too long after that time frame. And that, according to the Talmud, according to the Torah, is true. It was outlawed as far as the Torah is concerned. But what's interesting is that although it was outlawed, the principle, the act continued. It persisted. It went about in the royal European families. It went about in the royal Asian families, African families. It still continued. It continues to this day when people of power intermarry their children with other people of power, and then those children sometimes are related and they marry as well, because they're keeping this power, is what we would normally think. They're keeping this power. Now we know in today's world that this incestuous type of relationship creates abnormalities, but back then it was about keeping the purified bloodline. And that, my friend, that simple life I'm good, just a simple life I'm good, is the real answer. The real answer is about maintaining a bloodline that is of royal priestly descent. Right? So first, let me show it to you and prove to you how Moses is the son of his aunt, his great aunt. So right here, what you see is the fact that this is a family tree from Abraham down to Moses and Moses' son with Zipporah, Moses' children with Zipporah. So here's the deal. Moses, if you look at it, Abraham, him and Sarah have Isaac. Isaac get with Rebecca. Rebecca and them have Jacob. Jacob goes, and right here with Jacob, we see incest. Jacob actually goes, and it's not on here yet, because the tree is not bigger. Jacob actually goes to his uncle, wants Leah and Rachel, winds up getting both of them, his cousins, and then he marries them, and then, so we get Leah, first incestuous part from Jacob, and then the 12 tribes with Levi. And of course, between Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, they have all these kids. So, and then some other slaves and everybody else. So then Levi has kids, Gresham, Kohath, Maria, and Jochebed. I'm probably saying these names wrong, but I don't care. Jochebed. Jochebed is a daughter. Kohath has a son, Amram marries his aunt, Jochebed, and they have 3 kids, Miriam, Aaron, Moses. right there, it shows you Moses' mother is also his great aunt, Jochebed. So it was incestuous, but here's the thing that's missing that you may not get. Abraham, he wasn't just randomly chosen. In the Bible and the Torah, it just says that God looked and he saw Abraham, and Abraham was keeping the old ways, and Abraham was doing the right thing, so God chose Abraham to carry on and make his promises, right? Abraham, what you don't really know is that Abraham was a priest. He was from a priestly line, right? We go all the way back, through Genesis, and you find he comes from this priestly line, from the line of Seth. But here's the thing about that, and Seth, of course, is a child of Adam and Eve. What's missing from this understanding is the Sumerians. That's what's missing. You see, this same story, everything in Genesis is already pre-told in the Sumerian stories, which are older than the Hebrew story. And you got to remember, if you saw my other video on the origins of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you saw where I talked about how the Greeks came together to formulate the Septuagint, which gave these stories. Now, Abraham, coming from that Sumerian, now when you look at the Sumerian story, Abraham was chosen by Enlil when all the world was divided up amongst the Anunnaki. Enlil looked around and saw that Abraham was keeping the old ways. And you got to remember, Abraham comes from the city of Ur, which is a Sumerian city, all right, in Mesopotamia. So Abraham, a Sumerian, was looked upon by Enlil, who became Yahweh, Jehovah. Enlil looked at Abraham and said, you're keeping the old ways, you're from a priestly line, you have some, and that priestly line has some Anunnaki, close Anunnaki blood in it, so I'm going to make you my dude, and I'm going to give you, all of this. This is the Sumerian story. The Sumerian story breaks it down now, but the Sumerian story is even more detailed. So now, what does that mean with the Sumerians? Okay, so the Sumerians were the ones who Abraham had this incest and all that kind of stuff, and we see that in the Bible. And of course, people always like to explain away that, well, the reason why Cain had a wife in this other city is because Adam and Eve had these untold number of kids, and he married his sister. That is like the first made-up idea of incest as far as the Bible is concerned. But nowhere does it really start stating how people marry. It's not till later that it shows that people marrying their cousins and sisters and all that kind of stuff. But what we do know is that Abraham's story actually begins with the Sumerians. So what can we learn from the Sumerians in concern with incest? Because we can learn a ton from the Sumerians. And we are going to go offbeat on some of the areas so that you can really get a full understanding of this incest, why the incest works the way it is, and why powerful and royal families still are doing it regardless of the fact that the churches claim that they shouldn't be. Because we can look at the King Charles II of Spain and see that he is the product, his dad is actually his great uncle, all right? And if you look up the line even further, you see where another great uncle married his daughter, his niece. So we see his dad is his great uncle, and this is Charles II of Spain, all right? So let's go back to the Anunnaki. What happens? We're gonna look at two different genealogy charts of Mesopotamian gods. First, we got to start with the earliest one, because the earliest one sets the tone for the incestuous relationships that we still follow today, right? These royal families, these powerful families still follow this incestuous mindset, regardless of what's been put in your books, regardless of the titles of Christianity, Islam, or Judaism, or Hinduism. It doesn't matter what titles we call it today. Those of upper echelons still follow the incest, and the church still grants, the churches still approve of these marriages. Think about it. And the King of Spain, Charles II, was an approved marriage, was an approved union of a niece and an uncle. And that was approved by the church, right? So, what we're looking at is, what you're looking at right now, is a genealogy chart of the earliest part of the Anunnaki story. To give you an idea. Now, some people I've already lost some Christians already, I know, or some Muslims and some Jews. I already lost them. For those who are still with me, I might lose a few of you now. Now, I'm not taking everything as a literal truth, but these are just stories that the Sumerian tablets left, right? And there's over 20,000 tablets that say the same thing. What the tablets say is that Apsu won the rulership over Nibiru, over all the Anunnaki. And after he won that, excuse me, I got some incense burning. He won the leadership over over Nibiru. He became king. But then he set down the path to royalty, the path to rulership. And what he said was that out of the union of me and my sister, only people who are born through that line, through that first marriage of me and my sister, can become king over Nibiru, over the Anunnaki. So Apsu marries his sister Tiamat. Tiamat and Apsu have children, Mamu, Lahamu, and Lamu, and Kingu. Now the thing about it is, Lahamu and Lahamu have children, Anshar and Kishar. Their children are Anu, Antu, and Ki. This is where it starts to get interesting. Now you already see that brother sister got married, have kids. Now we got 3 siblings. Now the thing about it is that Ki is the primary wife of Anu. She's the first wife. Antu is the second wife. So a child born from the second wife cannot be king. We see this in royal families and heritage throughout history, where somebody may be firstborn but they don't get the inheritance, right? So Antu and Anu have Inki, right? This is very important. They have Inki. But then Anu and Ki have Ninharsag and Enlil. So when they have Ninharsag and Enlil, that makes Enlil as the first male between the first wife and Anu, the king, the son who's going to take over. This is when all the craziness really start kicking in, because Enlil and Enki, they don't like each other. They fight for eons. These two jokers keep fighting. They don't like each other. They're always trying to usurp authority from one another. So, because Enki being the smarter one and the more caring one, and Enlil is just like, he don't like humans, he don't like dealing with people. He's like more of a military ruler who just want to make people do what he wants them to do. Whereas Enki is more like science oriented, discovery, you know, want to build communities and things like that. So they have this constant power struggle for decades. And for those who still believe that the Anunnaki are involved in human affairs today, this battle is still going on between their children and so on and so forth. So, because the Anunnaki were supposed to have lived like hundreds of thousands of years is how long they lived, which is why people thought they were gods, because they just didn't die. But it just took them a long time to die. Right? So, when you look at the graph, you see that, you know, Enlil, he gets with his sister Ninlil, they have kids. He gets with his sister Ninharsag, they had kids. Well, Enki is also getting with his sister Ninharsag. They down in southern Africa area in the Apsu, where we've discovered that there are ancient human civilizations near ancient diamond mines that are like 200,000 years old down in the South African area. And according to the Sumerian story, that's where Enki and Ninharsag and one of Enki's son was down there playing around with early hominids, right? Now what they was doing, according to the story, is that they was taking the early hominid female, they took her egg, they took the Anunnaki sperm, they put that into an Anunnaki womb, and that created the first Homo erectus. Then after they did that, they took the Homo erectus egg, because it was improved upon, put the Anunnaki sperm, put that into another Anunnaki womb. They get, you know, like Neanderthal. And they kept doing this until they got 16 versions of man. You see this when you see the Anunnaki with the little tree of life thing that they create. You see that tree of life on the Sumerian tablets and everything, on the cylinder seals. They are creating man, or otherwise, let us create man. Now this was done because they needed help mining the gold, which is why your Bible says that in the Eden there was much gold in the land, because the Anunnaki needed gold. So see, you got these things that are in there that you may have questioned, like why does God need gold? Well, the Anunnaki needed gold to fix their atmosphere. So, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff that's happening in between. I'm just focusing in on the incest. Now the reason why I had to tell you about them doing that, creating man, is because once they created Homo sapien, they got to that point where now man can be more helpful to the Anunnaki, because now there's more Anunnaki blood in their system, in man's system. We've evolved enough that we can actually perform and do things. Well, and their names were like Adamu, Adama, and Adapa, and Adamu. So Adam. So we get all these names that are very, 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 very similar. So anyhow, Enki, you know, so Enki sends some of them up there to Enlil up in Eden, or Eden as they called it in the Chaldean area called Eden. Sends them up there. They up there working, they're doing their thing, and you know, a lot of time is going by, a lot of fighting, infighting, a lot of, you know, gods having wars in the sky because they get mad at each other, and you know, so it's a bunch of stuff going on. But you get to a point where, you know, and in all of this stuff, these jokers are still having kids with one of, like, Enlil and his sister Ninlil. They have a child named Nergal, right? And Nergal gets with his cousin Ereshkigal, and they have a child, and you know, and Enki gets with his granddaughter, and they have children, and you know, it's like Enlil gets with his granddaughter, like Elnana, her and her father, her grandfather Anu, they get together and they have a kid because her husband got killed and she wasn't going to get a piece of the pie when they was divvying up the earth, so they had this fight. The reason why humans come into play is because in the story, one of Enki's son, Marduk, he was mad because he was never getting the opportunity to be in charge, and he kept starting fights. Like, he built the Tower of Babel, according to the Sumerian story. Enlil and his forces got mad about that, so they bombed it and blew it up. You know, they bombed that, changed the language. Then later on, they still in the war against each other, so they bombed Sodom and Gomorrah, which were Marduk cities. And so there's this whole war thing going on. So Marduk gets to a point where he's like, forget it. I'm never gonna be in charge of Nibiru or Earth, so I'm gonna marry me one of these humans. And then Anunnaki is like, what? You gonna marry a human? What? You crazy. But he goes ahead, he gets ready to marry this human. Now when he gets ready to marry the human, what happens is all these other lesser Anunnakis like, oh, well, if he get to marry a human, they swoop in at his wedding party. They scoop, it's about 300 of them, they scoop up a whole bunch of women, females, and they like, look, you gonna let him marry his human? We get to marry our human, because humans not involved now, they looking kind of good. And so now the Anunnaki, they interbreed with the humans. Now we start getting the Nephilim is what they were called. In the Bible, we sons of God, see the daughters of men, they love looking beautiful, they come down, they swoop them up. So this happened in the Sumerian story, but it was at a wedding of Marduk and his human wife. So then we start getting these Nephilim. Well, these Nephilim, this is why in your Bible, it's kind of weird, right? When I was growing up, I was taught that these were the spawns of hell, the demons who swooped down, the fallen angels who swooped down and got these women and got them pregnant. But it says that the Nephilim were great men of renown. How do you call like a half demonized person an evil thing if you were a demon who got a woman pregnant? But how are you a great man of renown? That never made sense it didn't make sense until I read the Anunnaki story. I was like, oh, so that's where they get it from. So, and because most of them, you know, this is Marduk, so it's Enki's son, and Enlil didn't like Enki, and like I said before, Enlil, like Abraham, gave him the promise. All right, so anyhow, so they start marrying these humans. You start getting these half Nephilim, these half Anunnakis. Then, in a huge twist, Enki sees these two women. They look good. He go get with both of them. One of them have a son, Adamah, and the other one has a daughter, Titi. Well, Titi and Adamah get together. They have two kids. Now, mind you, these are half Anunnaki, half human. They get together, and they have, they get together, and then they have two twins. Those twins' names are Cain and Abel. Sounds familiar. Cain and Abel. Cain was in charge of, because he was like half Anunnaki, he was put in charge of grain and water production. He ran the irrigations and all the grain production. Abel was in charge of all the sheep and cattle, so he was in charge of meat and all that. And that's a whole nother story how they got to putting meat and more farming together. But that's a whole nother story which caused even more fighting between Enki and Enlil. But anyhow, so they doing that. And then after a while, you know, the Anunnaki, they tripping, they going crazy over people, and maybe it's because they doing all this interbreeding and stuff, you know, boning all over the place. And it gets so bad that the humans are like, you know what, forget y'all, we don't like y'all no more, y'all mistreating us, so they run off. You know, they have this big war, this big rebellion, and the humans leave, right? And this is like 100,000 years ago. Humans all leave. Well, the humans all leave. They all over the place, but some of them stay. Those who like, no, the gods are great, they stay. The ones who say that, they stay, and then they start serving the gods. They start serving all the Anunnaki. And as they're serving the Anunnaki, other humans start recognizing that the more Anunnaki blood you got, the higher positions you would have. Like if you had, like if you was a quarter Anunnaki, you might get to be a low level priest. If you was like a half Anunnaki, you get to be a priest. If you was like 2/3 Anunnaki, you get to be a king. Cause like Gilgamesh was half Anunnaki, I mean 3/4 Anunnaki. So he was a king, right? Because Gilgamesh was that way, and then you also had Ningishita, not Ningishita. You had Zoroaster. Zoroaster was also half Anunnaki, because if you read the book of Enoch, and you also see it in the Sumerian story, Zoroaster was again Enki, saw this human woman, said she looked good, went and got down with her. When the lady had the baby came out, had white skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. This is in the book of Enoch. And Enoch's dad was like, oh, this ain't my child. But then one of the other, I think it was Ninharsad, came to his dad and like, look, this is the child, you know, one of the guys came, the guy came in, got down with her, and this child is from the guy, so you just be the child's father on earth. That sounds familiar, right? This is one of the reasons why the book of Enoch was taken out in the 1400s at the Council of Laodicea, because that part of the story sounds like the Mary and Joseph story with the angel saying that, oh, Joseph, don't freak out, this is a child from the Holy Ghost. Well, that happened in the book of Enoch with Zoroaster, otherwise known as Noah. So Noah, being half Anunnaki, was like, you know, he was chilling, doing his thing. But you see how like the guys came in, they having sex with these people. But so we got all that going on. Now what happens next is what gets us closer to today's time. What happens next is that Nibiru is coming back into the solar system, closer to the sun, and they doing the research, see what's going to happen. It rips off half of Mars. This is what happened like 8,000 years ago. It rips off the 6,000 years. It rips off Mars, the atmosphere of Mars, and they see that it's going to cause this big ice shelf to fall into the ocean, and it's going to flood like 80% of the Earth is going to be flooded. Just northern hemisphere all the way down almost to the end of the southern hemisphere, but not fully. That's why like the southern hemisphere doesn't have a flood story, but it's going to flood all this land. So, and you got this story all over the world. So Enki, now Enlil is in charge, right? And Enlil, he's in charge of Earth. Anu is back on the home planet. So Enlil is like, look, I'm tired of all these humans. I want them to die. And I'm done with them. So he gives this decree that he says that anybody who's married to an Anunnaki, anybody who got Anunnaki blood in them, anybody who's half Anunnaki, anybody who's full Anunnaki, they go up to the highest mountaintops or whatever, and you can survive, but don't tell nobody else. Any of the royal family, we're gonna be above the earth, checking it out, just watching it happen. So that's what they do. Problem is, when it does come in, when the planet does come in, it rips, and this is according to the Sumerian story, it rips a hole in the atmosphere. That hole messes up, it rips a hole in the atmosphere in the Nibiru. That hole makes all that gold that they had, all that monatomic gold they have been putting in their atmosphere to fix their ozone layer for all the wars that they have been having. Oh, that's why Apsu became the king, to fix it, because they were having too many wars. That just messes up all that. So they need gold production to happen again. But Enlil not killed all the people. So what he does, he come back, he said, okay, well, people are still in the mountains, you know, they're like quarter Anunnaki or whatever, so we need them to start, you know, having babies. So they start having babies again. This is why now because the population has dropped tremendously, so they start having babies again. They need people to mine the gold so they can fix the planet, fix Nibiru, the home planet. Well, in doing all of this, they started saying that, look, in order for us not to have all these problems like we had last time, this was Enki's idea, and let us not to have all these problems, let us put those with the most Anunnaki blood but are still human in charge of all the other humans. Let's make them pharaohs and kings. And they already had like an understanding of this, because that is why you get stuff like Osiris. Like Osiris and Isis are brother and sister. They have a kid that kid name is Horus, right? But they're brother and sister. So so what they do is, and here's the thing, Horus is like Anunnaki. Every pharaoh is declared to be Horus. Oh, before I go there, let's track all the way back. Because they had made 16 virgins of man, and they have been placing humans at the top of the food chain who have most Anunnaki blood in them. When Cain killed Abel, the reason why there was already a city, because the workers who worked for Cain were all these like Neanderthals and other lower levels of man, and the ones who worked for Abel were the same. So Cain easily found a city, but he wasn't allowed to mate with another Anunnaki. The mark on Cain is not being able to mate with his line would decrease in Anunnaki blood. That's the mark of Cain. Less Anunnaki bloodline. So I forgot about it. I was supposed to talk about that a while back, but let me hit it now. Now come back to this part. So with the Egyptians, you have a similar situation. Marduk, pissed off, he becomes Ra. He rewrites all the history and all that kind of stuff, and he puts all these other little guys in charge. But what he doesn't rewrite is the genealogy, is the blood, keeping the royal blood. And you see by this one, he got himself as Atum Ra. Then you got Shu and Tefet, and then he's Shu as well, and they have kids, Jeb and Nuit, and then he's Jeb as well. And then he has, so this is why Atum Ra looks the same, because this is all Marduk, because he rewrote the history. Then Marduk is as Jeb and Nut as the creator, because Ra wanted to be, Marduk said, I'm going to be the creator of all earth. He is Jeb and Nut, which they have a creation story of Nut being the waters above the waters and Ra being the waters below. Anyhow, so Jeb, or Jedi, just throwing that in there, they have kids, Osiris and Isis. Osiris and Isis, brother and sister, they have their son Horus, and from the line of Horus you get the pharaohs. Because, like I said, Enki had decided, look, well, Enlil agreed with Enki that we should let the humans be kings and queens, and we just run everything through them. Because last time when we tried to separate all the lands and all that kind of stuff, all it did was cause war, and we had wars amongst each other. So instead of us doing that, let's create our royal bloodlines. And so that's what they did. They created their royal bloodlines with the pharaohs, with people like Akhenaten, with all the people who have claimed royal bloodlines from the Greeks and whatnot. Because when you look at the Greeks, and I know this one is a lot, but I don't want to go, we're not going to go through all this stuff with the Greeks, because Greek stuff is like just whacked out crazy, right? But when we look at the Greeks, I mean, just from before you get to Zeus, you had chaos, which is when everything was in disorder. Sounds familiar? Like from about disorder, chaos, right? Chaos he got some kids, right? But his kids get with each other and have more kids. So they brothers and sisters getting with each other. Gaia gets, with, I can't even say the name, Terratanus, whatever, you know what I'm saying. But then the main one I want you to see is, look at Zeus. If you look dead center, you see Zeus. Zeus is getting like with all his aunts and cousins and sisters. Hera is Zeus's sister. Demeter, Zeus's sister. Leto is his aunt, right? I mean, dude is getting down with everybody. He's getting down with aunts. He's getting down with cousins. He's getting down with sisters. He's getting down with everybody. Just Zeus is just getting it and having kids with everybody. And then we know Zeus is the father. He gets down, he has Hercules and all these other little kids. Zeus just be tripping. Right? So we know the Greeks, same thing, but we can find that kind of thing all over where they got it from the gods, from the story of the gods. And let me tell you how that persisted. Even when you look at Christianity, the Holy Grail, the cup of Christ, right? Some say it's the womb of Mary Magdalene, because that was his wife. Right? And if you look at ancient Hebrew, no one could have been called a rabbi or master if they weren't married. So this idea that Jesus was single, no, Yeshua was not single. He had a wife, Mary Magdalene. That's why she's the only woman that has a name, has a title, Mary Magdalene. And it ain't coming from the city of Magdala, because that city wasn't around back then. But Magdalene means feminine tower. Mary, feminine. Magdalene tower or fortress of power. So Mary, a feminine tower of power, married to Yeshua, the sacred male, coming together to form a bloodline. Charlemagne claims this bloodline. The Merovingians claim this bloodline. It became a big deal to be able to claim the bloodline of Yeshua during the Christian era throughout Europe, because that gave you a bloodline of royalty. And so they wanted to keep that. That's why now you see people try, they try to say, kings and stuff try to say, I'm from the bloodline of Charlemagne or from the Merovingians. And then people were able to buy into it. The Knights Templars, as they grew in power as a banking consortium, they were able to buy into royalty. When you look at the Medicis, they were able to, as they became the bankers of Europe, bankers of Ferdinand and Isabella, who Ferdinand and Isabella were cousins, who were the rulers of Spain when that joker Columbus came over here and started his mess. But they bought themselves into royal blood, and you see that with the Medicis buying their way into royal bloodline. So, and being able to marry above their current state. So in today's world, we see people look at the families like the Rothschilds. They buy, once Mayor Rothschild and Amstel and all that, as the more powerful they became, they buy their ways in. We see today, we got Sir Richard Branson, right? Richard Branson, he becomes a billionaire, and now he's Sir Richard Branson. Now his children will be able to get involved with lords and dukes and whomever else, and so they can make their way into royalty because they became rich and powerful. This same system that is set up that we do today is exactly what the Greek gods did, the Egyptian gods did it, and it goes, and it's all throughout your Bible, but it goes all the way back to the Sumerians. It was first learned by watching what the Sumerians did and seeing that those who had the most Anunnaki blood got preferential treatment. So why did Aram marry his aunt, and then they produced children, Miriam, Aaron, and Moses? And this is the bloodline of the ancient Hebrew story, is because it's trying to preserve the bloodline of the Anunnaki. It is not, and even if you go to if you say that, oh well, they were really just trying to preserve the bloodline of Adam and Eve, but like I told you, in the Sumerian story, before the Adam and Eve story is even written, before it was even known, because the Sumerians are much older and Abraham came from the Sumerians, it was Enki who got down with these two chicks. And I'm not sure, that's why I didn't say it the first time. I think those two girls might have been sisters, but he got down with those two. I believe they were sisters. Got down with those two. They had Adamah and Titi, and Adamah and Titi had Cain and Abel. And then the same story goes, except that it's over a 7-year period of arguing between Cain and Abel, that Cain smashes Abel's head over with a rock, but his punishment was that he couldn't marry anybody with, he couldn't get down with people with Anunnaki blood, so he went, that's why he had to go into the city where there was the lower level humans were living, and then started that one, and then had his line of, all them other jokers with the Cain name. But I hope that answers your question. I know there's a lot of detail in that, but if you think deeply about this whole situation, this is why, in India, they have their caste system, where if you were born into a lower caste system, if you watch my video I did on the Agori, the Agori it personifies this caste system of the Indian culture. So, and yes, they've outlawed the caste system. True, it's outlawed. It's against the law. Just like marrying your first cousin is against the law in America, but people still did it up until like the 50s. And actually, when I was in the Marine Corps back in the 90s, I had jokers I know who married their first cousins, and so they still gave them their marriage license. The preachers still did the wedding ceremony. And so for all you Protestants who say, well, that's what the Catholics did, they did this before the Protestant Reformation. They did this after the Protestant Reformation. This continued, and it was all sanctioned by the church and the state. So you still have this going on. And that caste system is still evident in India. It's still evident in many countries. It's underneath, it's kind of evident here in America. If you were born into the hood, yes, you have a way out. But let's think about it. are the schools set up to help people get out of poverty? No, they're not. They're set up to help you stay where you are, to do only about 10% better than your parents. But in today's world, most kids are doing less than what their parents. But our school system is not set up to grow you into a higher echelon. You're staying within the same levels that you grew up in for the most part. Most people. Hopefully you guys aren't, but most people are. So we still have that same type of caste system, and it takes you exerting a brilliancy to become your Warren Buffetts, to become your Gary Vaynerchuk's, and to become Bill Gates and all these other people who have started at a lower echelon and made their way up, who become rich and powerful, and now these rich and powerful have that ability. I mean, you take a guy like the former President Obama, in the economic level that he was born into, most people that he grew up with stayed pretty much at that level, but he was able to get his way into the higher educations of Harvard, and then from there into other political arenas, and now president. Now he's up there. Now his kids, they won't marry more than likely someone who is like a truck driver. No, they'll probably be with people who are more rich and more famous, more powerful. Tiger Woods, he started military brat. They usually will marry somebody who's middle class, maybe even upper middle class, since his father was like higher military and retired. But now that he's made his way to where he's at, his kids will probably marry of a higher echelon. We still have that caste system, and it comes from this whole aspect of the more Anunnaki blood you have, then you are bred. You have better breeding. And if you think about that, how many times have you saw a movie or something that talked about, oh, you don't have the breeding for this. If you weren't born from a child of a senator, then you don't have the breeding for politics. It's about breeding. It's about breeding. So that hopefully answers your question in way more detail than you probably asked. But you guys keep sending questions, keep asking questions, because these things really make me have to go back and look at some stuff and make me like connect even a couple of more extra dots that weren't connected before. And it's not that I'm reading into anything, because some of you may think, oh, you're just reading into it. And look, this stuff was written before your Qurans and Torahs and your Bible. All right, it was written before that. And even if it wasn't, it's still the same stuff. Even this stuff, it's the same. And to say that, oh, it ended after that, no, it didn't. They kept doing it. They kept doing it. And you have to ask the question, if they kept doing it and honoring it, they tell you to do one thing, but they do something else. But they kept doing it and they kept honoring it. You got to think about that. If those who became your leaders, those who became in charge, who created your anities and your isms, kept doing it, kept approving it, what does that really say about it? What does it really say about it? Okay? Because when you look at the Romans, they kept doing it. They kept trying to keep the empire, the bloodlines. So what does it really say? So you guys take this information. I hope you really dig deeper for your own self. Go research it yourself. Go find all the genealogy charts, the family trees. Go read the Anunnaki story. Go get all the information, because I want you to know this for yourself. Because you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable, and so is mine.